dictators, etc. So, or it became democratic, because whether the autocratic form is older or whether the democratic form is older is suspect, because we have evidence of a democracy in the Roman Empire which is prior to Christ. So we can't say that democratic form of governance is a modern age phenomenon. It is as old as, and the whole concept of Panchayati Raj in India was some form of a governance structure which might have happened at a village or a very small congregation level. So irrespective of the style of governance, society needed to create government. So the first engine to drive society was government. And there was a parallel engine that was happening, which was the religion. Now, religion was talking only about individual behavior of people, but not talking about collective behavior of the society. And which is why there was a void and the structure like government came in, otherwise there was no room for a government to come in. So it was the free will of the people that they needed a structure and governments were created. So if we have a large country, and I would use this board as my analogy for the country, we created a structure called government. Now, what is this government supposed to do?
Can you say government is also kind of just a name, but you can also call it something like a social institution which played the role of the government in the previous?
No, social institution I'll define separately. Okay. Now, these governments were supposed to define, or in the first instance, who would be the functionaries of government. So either I'll have a king, or I'll have a president, or I'll have a prime minister. I would have officers, whether they would be selected or they would be elected. There would be norms, and every society would create its own systems of governance. So elected forms of government, selected forms of government, deputed forms of government, sometimes the church deputed monarchs. So, but it was a social intervention that governments came into being. Now these governments had one larger objective, and that was public interest, because they were designed by the public to serve the interests of the public. So in that process, the kind of things that they were supposed to take up were things that in today's world we call as police, fire, medical care, defense, energy, sanitation, infrastructure construction, education, healthcare, because these were supposed to be public good and public goods. So it was very easy for those systems to understand that because government has been created to serve the public interest, so government has to deliver the public good. And that energy led to creation of what we typically call as public sector. And there is no country in the world which does not have a public sector.
Only the degrees differ.
The degrees could differ, because then the government can choose what things they want to get into or what things they want to get out. But there is no government in the world which does not have public sector.
Because by definition, government is a public body.
Government is a public body which is destined to deliver public good.
And public
so even if you go on minimizing
or the definition
and you go on transferring the delivery of public good to somebody else as a private enterprise, at least one thing which would still be retained would be a thing called defense. And the only logic for keeping defense as defense all over the world is a monopoly, and it is always a public sector monopoly.
But I think there is an evidence in the case of I think Roman Empire. There was even army was outsourced.
One is outsourcing a part of it. For example, now recruiting in the US Army has been outsourced. Parts of specialized training in the US Army have been outsourced, especially in the high-tech areas and high-tech warfare. Parts of it is being outsourced. And what is the logic given for maintaining defense as not being privatized. A logic that is used is actually contrary to a perception of public sector, that scale economies lead to scale efficiencies, and unity of command is more critical.
Is that the logic for defense?
For defense to
only?
be, and which is why, irrespective of who is the supreme commander of Indian Defence Forces, is President of India and not the Prime Minister.
No, why?
Because we have to create a unitary command structure.
But again, from economics perspective, there is another logic for the defense to be in the public sector. It's just a pure public good perspective, which is that pure public goods cannot be provided by the individuals, because the benefit when you derive cannot be what we call non-rival and non-exclusion principle. That also classically applies to
The thing is, when you create government, what are the principles that they define? First is how selection, election, whatever is the first process. Second is what they would allow and what they would prohibit as activities by their subjects. And it is there that different governments can choose to widen the net of what will go into public sector or could narrow the scope. So allowing of activities and disallowing of activities is a role that the government performs through its legislative arm. And it is supposed to be reflective of the public opinion. So the terminology that I am building up is public opinion, public interest, and public good.
Just to add to the discussion a little bit, I'm going backwards. I mean, I'm not going to these issues, but the emergence of the government can also be related with if you go back to the human development. Till we settled down as agriculture, there was something, tribal society, for instance, there was no surplus. No surplus means there is no possibility of a trade or public good even. I mean, the thing is, if you are not generating enough surplus, that means the economy is at more or less subsistence level. And if the subsistence level is there, then basically there is no scope for social welfare improvement because everybody is at the minimum level. The moment you have a little more than what you need to survive, then what happens is surplus gets created. Now the surplus basically ultimately in a way it's coming is to increase the efficiency. Also the government is needed. The thing is, the moment why do we create public goods? It's because that increases the efficiency of the private individual.
Absolutely.
So that's where another perspective in which the government comes in.
But even in that society, when people got together and they had no surpluses, they still started talking about the first public good called defense. Because they needed to protect themselves, if not against other tribes, the wilderness of the wild. So at that time, people were making a contribution, not in terms of the common day taxes, but in terms of their time. And devolving the responsibility, that today I'll keep a watch, tomorrow you keep a watch. So it was still happening. And the taxes in some form, which became the resource of that governance system. Because this government now needs resources. And which is why it will impose taxes. So that resource would come, and in that society, because there is nothing being exchanged, there is no surplus, it is being exchanged in terms of whatever human resources are possible, and fundamentally the labor itself.
In private society, labor is the constraining factor.
And whatever is available, so that will be shared. And the second thing that started happening in that society was now start providing for healthcare. And if the healthcare was not in terms of mitigating disease, supporting people who are diseased. So I may not be investing into prevention of disease, but if somebody has fallen ill, I will still provide for him, or if nothing else, mercy killing. Now that itself is a social intervention. In some form, let the head of the tribe say, kill this man. And that is how we legitimize the affairs. Now when the government got created, and there is no government in the world which does not have a private sector.
Unless somebody wants a black tea or something.
So there is no government in the world which does not have a public sector, or there is no country in the world which does not have a public sector. Likewise, there is no country in the world which does not have a private sector,
No country in the world.
which does not have a private sector.
That any individual working is also private sector conceptually?
Some form or the other. So a second entity came up which I call as business.
Or productive sector.
Whatever. These definitions would change according to the perspective that you are taking. It could start as an individual
Surplus.
whatever. Now these people are not trading primarily into public good, but that good which this public sector is not willing to handle.
We need to allow, the government allows this.
Because the eventual responsibility of all public good is on the government. But meeting wants and desires of people is not a public good. So business became an individual enterprise of peddling to the demands of the subjects in the society, and would also do things which the government would allow. So when government permitted business to operate, there was a fragment created which I will call as regulatory issues. Because eventually the business would be controlled by government in terms of ensuring that in support of private initiative and private enterprise, the public interest need not be harmed.
So regulatory issues address the need.
They permit
They will not harm the public.
public interest.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at how government works versus how business works, government is accountable to public. But business is accountable only to investors.
And investors represent a small minority of the total public.
And they could be investors could lie outside this domain because they might
From
be
out.
somewhere else. The decision making in the government is democratic. The decision making in the business is autocratic. The actions of government are in public knowledge and public domain, but the decision making by the business is confidential.
In government also there are two types of enterprises. One where everything is public, where the other types are where things are not.
After RTI, except for matters of national security, now everything is in public domain.
By definition, government decision or whatever should be in public.
It is in public domain. So governments would want to protect public interest, business would want to protect investor interest. Government would normally operate, please mark my word, normally, so there can be exceptions to the rule, will normally operate monopolies. But business enterprises would normally operate under competitive circumstances. But in spite of being monopoly, actions and decisions of government would be in public domain, and actions and decisions of private sector would not be in public domain.
This is quite a
Look at the
interesting formula.
But in a way, the policy of the government to have the business running itself requires so that they conform to public interest in competition.
And competition itself is handled through regulation.
That's what I was.
So, to manage this
Investor,
body, government manages it through regulations.
And that's how it tries to encourage competition so that the
Right, sir? Whom are they peddling to? Government will peddle to citizen interest and public domain. Managers in a private enterprise will peddle to their board of directors. Keep your investors happy, keep your board happy, and your jobs are protected. But a prime minister will lose his job if the public opinion turns against him.
Yeah, when the monarch will lose, like
You have a rebellion.
You have the French Revolution.
Normally, because public good would have a very wide ramification and very wide definition and very wide understanding, their area of operation would be very large. Business would always have defined domains of operation. So the end outcome would be, when we will design performance measurement metrics, due to the very nature of the design of the two systems, business enterprises would turn out to be more efficient than governments.
so they're operating in competitive environment. That
No,
No.
they are accountable in a limited domain to limited people.
okay. So that
So
encourages
that
them-
metrics would be just around those parameters.
You're measuring.
So conflict of the. Are you saying the?
No. The measuring matrix is limited.
It's limited.
So you can achieve it.
So it will be always be a sub-optimized model. In fact, if your telecom operators are making 60% gross profits on their revenues, if a government enterprise used to do that, it would be fleecing this economy.
They will not be acceptable.
Should not be acceptable. And any public sector enterprise making 60% gross margins, in spite of the fact that competition has given me the lowest call rates in the world, I'm not running that down. But because its metrics would always be top line, bottom line, and operating efficiency. And if you have to subject any part of government to the same parameters, then talk about it only in that limited domain. And then the government enterprise and private enterprise turns out to be equally efficient.
So all the PSU by definition, the way it was defined.
Yeah, and we know that what goes wrong with PSUs because the constituency that they need to serve becomes larger.
That's why I was saying, on one side you have workers, on the consumers, and the other side politicians. So they trying to pull them in different directions.
Now, there are people in the society who are neither happy with government nor happy with business. So they create a third organization which today calls itself as the civil society,
The NGO and all this.
the social sector.
Where the government and the private sector also contributes. That's what.
All social sectors has the same agenda of delivery of public good. And they say that we will do it because the government is inefficient in doing it. So they want to participate in healthcare, they want to participate in education, they want to participate in poverty alleviation, they want to participate exactly in the same domain. These are organizations that create passive resistance in society.
What is this? This one? Passive resistance.
So these people would always be anti-establishment. And yet, to thrive in this market, they need that the government should support them.
They are against it, but they need this.
Now, social sector, the term NGO was coined in 1945. And for the first time it was coined in a document which is called the Treaty of Nations, which was written after the Second World War, which led to the creation of UN. And there they identified, because the whole world was so depleted and the devastation of Second World War was so big, and there was a lot of these social organizations operating in parallel to those parts of the world where the governments have actually withered away, that UNO recognized that to rebuild the world, we would need the support of the government as well as the voluntary organizations.
The religious organization will come here also?
Religious organizations were basically for individual behavior, but when they interact in the society, they are here.
That's what I will.
They are here.
All the charitable and all.
They are here. Now, social sector thrived in the world by hijacking the agenda of the government. And now, they are trying to hijack the agenda of business by creating a new stream of knowledge which is called social enterprises.
Not for profit.
So, social enterprises perform only two roles. Roles destined for governments and now roles destined for business. The difference being, this sector is accountable to none.
Completely.
They are accountable to their constituency, they are accountable to their investors. This is accountable to none.
Themselves.
But we presume, and that's why the terminology is civil society, that the rest of the society is so uncivil that the civil will guide the uncivil.
ये तो बड़ा contradictory situation
है भाई साहब, जो मेरी परसेप्शन है मैं आपके साथ शेयर कर रहा हूँ.
नहीं how are
कोई
you
क्या पहली बार अटेंड कर रहे हैं क्या?
नहीं वो बात सही है
नहीं, सोचने वाली बात.
सारे सोचने वाली
Because
बात
in
होती है।
civil society I have always been suspect about, because as he said, the rest are uncivil, they just need to be.
नहीं I was thinking that
No.
they are not accountable.
Now, when social sector and business overlap, we get what is called ethical issues in society.
Yeah, because they can't have regulatory.
I think he's raising some. What you saying something?
No, I was saying social sector is accountable to none. Is basically, can you not look at it, the businesses which are self-accountable?
So then, not for anybody outside us.
This overlap, if you see, will, one of the forms that it takes where business and social sector operate is what is called the cooperative movement.
Okay.
That the owners act like investors
And the workers
and
everything.
the public good is being delivered to the same owners.
No, I think what he was raising was they are accountable to their group at least.
No, but the issue is, are you allowing creation of parallel governments?
No, I will suppose, if I were to conceptualize, I will say conceptually social sector and businesses are in the same thing. Here, if you there is no difference that I see. Why is there a difference? They are saying we will run it more efficiently.
Who are saying? Social sector.
Social sector. Mean as the government
Run what?
for the public goods.
So,
That's not it.
and the moment I accept this argument, the first thing that I have to accept is government failed in delivery of public good.
Not necessarily, but you can only tell that I assume that if I do it, I will be more efficient.
Or you can say what he's saying is
By
that
the same logic, why should we not outsource the Indian Parliament to some of the civil society organizations, that let them be good legislators rather than elected members from the public, because they are not throwing up good candidates to be our parliamentarians.
Given a choice, social sector guys may like to say that, but
social sector has two forms. बहुत मेरा pet subject है.
ये मैं जान सुना है कुछ.
It takes two forms. One is called the voluntary organization, second is called the grassroots organization. voluntary organizations are normally created by or initiated by one individual who is extremely unhappy with something that is happening currently in the society. So it is always the genesis of a voluntary organization is discontentment and disenchantment with something in the current scenario. And he tries to gather some like-minded people who make voluntary contributions rather than the taxes part. The government had to needed funding. Here the contribution is voluntary, and then they could create membership fees or whatever to regulate that system. Voluntary organizations would normally provide material support to causes and very rarely the labor support. So for example, people would create a Rotary Club or a Lions Club, which is a voluntary organization. They would gather and socialize, that is fulfilling their individual needs, but they would also possibly create some funds in case of some donations in case of a catastrophe or probably funding a child or things of those kinds. So they would normally support through material benefits for a cause, but would not directly interfere with the government policies. The second form is which is called the grassroots organization. Is an individual unhappy with something in the government?
Okay, so you are using this as the distinguishing factor. One is that the same system is made to work, so providing money, support. The other one is,
and these are additional social taxes over and above the taxes that I pay as an individual to the government.
it's voluntary. Also.
It is voluntary.
So this one is to, because you are discontent with the way government is working.
I would now, if I need resources, I try and generate them either from donations outside my members or from internal, but I would primarily try to fight a government policy.
So Baba Amte will put in here.
It's GR. The Indian National Congress is a GR. The Bangladesh Mukti Bahini is a GR. LTTE is a GR. And GROs in the long run take only two forms. Either they become political parties or they become terrorist organizations. And either way, you are fighting the government or trying to influence the government.
And then later on becoming part of the government, possibly. And one
Solidarity is the best example in Poland, which started as a GRO, anti-government, but finally got elected in.
It's like even Mizoram, Mizo National Front, and all Assam, Karna Parishad, and Nepal militants.
Indian National Congress also took two streams. The one stream which both was leading could have turned into a militant organization.
Yeah, the Britishers called him terrorist. Aurobindo was a terrorist.
So that's stretching it too far. Let's come to more civil society when we are talking about.
But another distinction could be that government is more at the macro perspective, whereas this is trying to handle the micro.
Absolutely, and we have whole amount of research data available that when the government tries to deliver public good and when these people try to deliver public good, the efficiency of delivery is the same. The visibility is high in this case because what these people do, they deliver high impact to low size of constituency.
High visibility.
So the impact by the social sector becomes more visible.
No.
Because social sector might pick up 20 destitute childs in Gurgaon and put them through school or college. So they might be able to make a larger impact on these 20 lives and that becomes visible. Whereas government may have to deal with 2 million or 200 million children. So there the magnitude of difference might not be same. But in terms of the delivery efficiencies, if we work out and costs and same parameters of efficiency, look at a website called charityvillage.com and you have complete evidence that the social sector has not been able to achieve delivery efficiencies that the government has been able to achieve.
that's like averaging out, isn't it? There's a problem with that kind of a way of doing comparative analysis, because there could be a kind of a, I don't know, sector-wise or some kind of issue-wise, if you make a distinction, you'll find somewhere the government mechanism will be more effective, whereas in somewhere social sector-based things will be more effective. So that averaging out may look like they are
not really. If you look at the cost of governance of social systems, and they have analyzed their complete balance sheets or whatever in terms of the, and they have looked at their performance indicators, their management styles, and the cost of management, and that turned out governments have been more efficient and cheaper in delivery of social good and public good than the.
Is it because of the size, economics?
Maybe there is size or economics, but social sector gets high visibility because they are able to create a larger magnitude of impact in a shorter period on a smaller size of population.
So what you mean is, if they try to do it on that scale, then they will be more inefficient than the government.
But conversely, if the social sector was to do it on the same scale, then social sector equal to government.
Yeah.
So it is independent of which sector it is. It is the task at hand.
Absolutely. And which is why don't imagine that we have to see which sector is more efficient. They are all equally efficient or inefficient on a global measurement scale.
Okay, what you mean is, if you factor in the scale, the business and the government
And the constituency.
and the social sector or the civil society,
Are equally
would be either
efficient.
equally efficient or equally inefficient.
I somehow feel uncomfortable with the title. They are equally efficient, because the thing is, I mean, in any theory cannot be true all the time for all the countries. So there could be kind of a, maybe if you look at Europe, for instance.
The exceptions will always
No,
be the
no,
rule.
he is
What?
telling it is
But that's what
not
I'm saying.
significantly different.
This is like saying equilibrium. They are all equally efficient.
No, they are not in equilibrium.
I'm just saying they're using the terminology, but I'm just saying they are equally efficient for all countries and all point of time. That's something
No, because
oversimplified.
those inefficiencies would vary on a time scale, because when governments would start faltering, for let's say for 10 years they are faltering governments. At that time, the society would survive because of the initiatives of these people. When the government is highly efficient on deliveries, these people will start taking a back seat. The same would happen to businesses. When government will get out of a public good and transfer it as a completely private good, then the business will start thriving. If the government also maintains the leg, then its regulatory framework would be distorted, because government would still have a protectionist policy about its own presence.
No, what I'm trying to get at is that if you look at the world across, so many countries are there, and you have Europe on one side. Within Europe, you have Eastern Europe versus Western Europe. Some countries have succeeded, some countries have failed. So somewhere there, I would like to kind of understand, in a way, contribution of which one has really made a difference.
Okay. Why is it that the Eastern Bloc could not come out of poverty? This
But
sole
most-
driver, these two you did not permit to operate, and whatever that you did was not worthy of performance even on your own parameters. Because the whole idea of constituency making, the whole idea of public interest shifted to what is called political interest. And I would like to make a difference between political opinion and public opinion. Wherever the political opinion and public opinion can be two independent streams, that is the first sign of government now failing to deliver what they are destined to deliver.
Can you articulate difference between public opinion?
Political opinion. Okay. Was the dream that Hitler had shared by every German? And the answer is no.
No, not all.
So Hitler had a dominant political opinion which he wanted to convert into public opinion and threw his country to war. Likewise, the communist school of thought, which was a part of public opinion, and the public embraced that thought, elected a government, designed a constitution, and then these own communists got into more management of political opinion within the ruling coalition rather than looking at the public opinion. So the public turned against them. And eventually the country fragmented. Which is why, if you look at the US presidential election, strategically, irrespective of the political lineage of the party, they do want to mobilize public opinion to their agenda. And they want it to become public opinion, whatever is their political opinion. And they are willing to change their political opinion to conform to the public opinion.
Was this the failure of the India Shining campaign?
सर ये इंडिया शाइनिंग मत करो, कल बहुत झगड़ा हुआ है इस पे.
नहीं, एक लाइन में बता.
India Shining campaign, in terms of its communication, never failed. Because it did increase the vote share for BJP. But the increase in that BJP got was insufficient still to win the elections. So the expected outcome in terms of parliamentary seats never happened. So by that logic, the campaign failed. But as a simple communication tool, it succeeded.
Or did it increase the number of votes in certain sectors?
No, BJP's vote share, aggregate national vote share went up by 4% in that election. But Congress was very successful in managing that the rest of the vote does not get divided. So their accumulated vote increased more than 4%.
That's what I was thinking. Because unless that is true, it is not
Correct
possible.
politics.
So the campaign was not failing, but the campaign, if the campaign alone was to deliver the total vote share, then it was asking the campaign to do too much.
No, what I was asking was that, let me put it in another way. Did the BJP get caught in their own political opinion agenda, not what...
In a bipolar election, a true bipolar election for BJP to get elected will be very difficult in this country.
But that is a little surprising because the thing is, in the previous election when they were being held, nobody thought the Congress is going to be kind of in any way becoming more significant. Is it possible that the BJP got more, but its allies got less?
You will have to work that out totally.
For the majority,
Because
even if the BJP gets more,
if you look at where Congress has gained, Congress also lost in its known places, BJP also lost in its known places. Because two things happened in those markets. In some of the constituencies, the actual voting, the aggregate voting fell short, and in some constituencies it climbed. So if you look at the aggregate percentage of votes polled between 1999 and 2004, Congress did not make a gain in terms of aggregate vote share of the total market of the electorate. BJP did gain, but when you break it down to fragmented markets of each constituency, there the difference is that Congress went through winning those seats.
So micromanagement was much better in case of Congress.
Absolutely.
There
And
might
wherever
be-
Congress was very sure that BJP is going to win, they designed strategies
to break
for this,
fragmentation.
knowing that my vote share cannot go up, how can I kill the BJP's vote share?
That's what is political strategy.
Absolutely. And this is why, if you look at the map and you color the map in terms of where BJP won between 1999 and 2004, the map is not the same. It has been very different. So, sir, coming to social sector, we got ethical issues here.
Just one question before that, please, don't mind. Would you subscribe to the view that certain things are best done by business?
That is what he is arguing.
The question that I am raising is, what is best done by business? In the first place would be defined by the government itself.
No. Intrinsically, business, the organization, I suppose you don't agree.
Because I would say it is the people of that country who would determine through the government what is best done by them. And that will get reflected through the government policy. That these sectors will open up, these sectors will not open up. This will be contained as public good, no questions asked. This will slowly privatize, this will never privatize. This will never be in public or government sector. Now those definitions would be, so it is the public which will judge. It is the country that will judge.
There was a reason why textiles was NTC, National Textiles,
Was created in.
was created, and
because that sector was failing to deliver.
So this.
So the public decided that now it will be better to convert it into a government monopoly. So what will be allowed and disallowed would still be determined by these people.
Like banking, we
But the problem or aberration would come when the public opinion and political opinion will be at loggerheads.
Yeah.
Because that is the time we can see a distortion in policy. If you have a truly representative, accountable government, there should be no discrepancy between political opinion and public opinion. It should always reflect 100% the public opinion. But that's never going to happen. Because that's a too utopian concept. So this creates what we call as the political and legislative issues. In fact, the pressure on the government to change its existing policy is normally initiated by the rebellious. This is not working. We need to privatize. We need to change this.
And they can also bring in what is called awareness.
Okay. So this interface creates the agenda for government's change. But eventually, they will all be judged on this common parameter, which I will call as the real public good. Unless everybody in the society is happy with what is happening. If people realize that NGOs are doing a damage, they will start hitting the NGOs. If they realize business is not performing, they will start hitting the business. If they realize government is not performing, they will vote them out. So 3 organizations happened, although the public wanted to create only one organization called the government. And they all share. Business shares delivery of public good, which the government is not wanting to deliver. Or for whatever reasons, efficiencies, resources or whatever, it is asking them to do it. Now moving further to something closer to your subject. This government social sector partnership has existed since 1945 in a legitimate way all over the world. Because the UN accepted it. So for delivery of that public good, in spite of the fact that they might be carrying on the same agenda, NGOs have normally received support from the government, if nothing else, in the form of financial support. So a public-private partnership between the social sector and the government is now more than 60 years old. The public-private partnership in some manufacturing sectors also happened in the form of joint sector projects. But the public-private partnership in those arenas which are true public good and business will not get in is a current day phenomenon.
Example?
This is infrastructure.
Infrastructure projects. Private sector will not do it of its own. Government has certain limitations. So now PPP as delivery of public good.
But that's more of a government and business together, isn't it?
So I'm saying that business and social sector relationships have been there for a long time. This relationship happened in case of some manufacturing, but is now
is also with business and government.
sorry.
Joint sector.
Joint sector was with business and government, but it was still restricted to manufacturing.
Manufacturing.
Now it is going beyond.
Or possibly it has already gone beyond, at least in some first world.
It started happening, and I'll give you the example. The first PPP project started in 1937 in UK.
UK. Which was this?
Sir, can I rub off this board now?
Yes. I will do it.
PPP basically the way we is defining is that the government is giving complete control to the private sector,
No, no.
or how are you?
Partnerships to deliver.
But then
and
there's a
how we would structure and those are left to the individual context in which we'll deal with it. I'll take you through a very generic example and then you'll see that all other examples can actually be a subset of design.
no, but if you go back to 100 years back, Indian Railways construction was also PPP actually in a way. Because British private companies and government is giving them that you make it and we will give guarantees.
But the ownership was not transferred to them.
Yes, it was transferred. They were all private railways.
No, private railways who had operating rights for that period, but the ownership of that asset never vested in those.
No, they were nationalized in 1935.
Correct. The ownership of, now you're talking in terms of a difference. One is the ownership of the company, second is the ownership of the asset. The assets created by the private railway network were never owned by them.
Technically, I don't know, but like
The company management was what was, it was like giving them a long lease, but the ownership vested with the government.
तो सर ये भी तो वही है अपना जो अभी गोल्डन क्वाड्रिलेटरल है
इसमें तो बहुत सारे मॉडल्स हैं यार, क्योंकि डिफरेंट स्टेजेस के अलग अलग मॉडल्स हैं. We can't generalize it, and people have run into parts that some parts got very quickly implemented. People are happy, private sector saw profits, and there are some parts that are still not being built. So there's a mix. It's a conglomerate. But let's look at another example.
But this PPP today is also on a similar model, since you are leasing it to the sector for some.
Those are how you are going to structure the partnership and how it will work. But the first public-private initiative happened in 1937, and it was in telecom, and it was for creating an emergency number. Three, purely public goods. I have a medical emergency, so I need to call an ambulance. I have fire in my home, a public good. Purely public good. Now, how do I seek help? So the British government requested the telecom company, and at that time we had the manual switchboards. Most people would pick up the phone. My house is on fire. Now he's not saying please connect me to this number. He's only saying my house is on fire. So these people, in 1937, the government initiated a program, because if I don't remember what is the number for ambulance, how do I expect the operator to remember the number? So the operator would then call a directory assistance number to find that number and then connect it. So to reduce this call time, they created one unified number, which was a 4-digit number, and all telephone operators were supposed to remember it, that if you get an emergency call like this, just plug in on help. Now, why was it a 4-digit number? Because by that time, UK was already operating on 4 digits. Now, 4-digit number means he has to still plug in 4 calls. So, till the customer dialing happened, this did not succeed. So, 1967, in the state of Alabama, a gentleman called Fitzgerald, बहुत पढ़ाई करी है तेरे इसके लिए मैंने
आपसे बोला नहीं बोला इसको उसको कनेक्शन से देगा.
He created the technology without changing the numbers for ambulance or fire or whatever, and launched the 911 service in Alabama.
Okay. Convert 911 into all this.
Now, 911 did not become popular in 1967, and please remember it's already a 30-year gap, 37 to, that's the time technology has taken. Mayor Lindsay in New York in 1968 was fighting his election for being the mayor of New York, and he was running for the second term. And he read an article about the launch of 911 service in Alabama. So he called the telephone company, the police department, and everybody, and said, I will give 911 to New York, and that will become the symbol of my efficient administration. So now we have got 4 stakeholders. The mayor. What does he want in 911? A symbol of efficient governance that should win him the election the second time. That is his constituency building objective.
He stated this.
He stated.
Symbol of my.
Yes, I want this to be initiated before the polling day, and it will be the symbol of my efficient administration. In fact, on the launch, everything went wrong, and I'll tell you that story as well.
Idea first.
So Mayor Lindsay has only one objective, and that is constituency making. And all governments would initiate infrastructure projects for constituency making.
Political objective.
And then they will try and work that their political opinion also serves the public opinion. Now, police. Why should they support it? They have only one objective. If we get information fast from the scene of crime, our conviction rates might go up. So, how would 911 be successful? If mayor gets re-elected, mayor says 911 is successful. How would police say 911 is successful? If they can actually catch criminals, bring down the crime rate, and lead to more convictions, that is their parameter of success. How would ambulance or the healthcare department say? If they can save lives. How would the fire department save losses? And what will the telecom company do?
Make profit.
No, nobody is going to pay for it. It's supposed to be free. This is in public interest. You better provide this service free. That's what the mayor
They
said.
will get other businesses.
Reputation.
Telecom says my call should get connected. If I fail to connect the call, I will have negative consequences.
Yes. Hello.
And the entire infrastructure is to be provided by telecom. Although the delivery of service to the citizen would be by these three people.
Okay. So the telecom will say we are efficient.
They can only get a discredit for being inefficient, but they will never get a credit for being efficient.
Classes?
They will avoid negative points.
If on this road I still have a bottleneck in my travel time, I will say this flyover has not served its
एक
purpose.
दिन में 200 एक दिन में 200
But it could also be telecom in that time. I don't know, must be in the private, possibly a private company was there.
There were 4 companies,
This is already
and all companies were to provide this, and what would be the basis in terms of paying those costs, or everything would be still to be negotiated.
Hello.
So no, these are a regulated sector also, isn't it? Telecom. So
There is a government regulation.
No, even if there are 4 telecoms, like for example now, can we dial 100 and Airtel, Vodafone, all this, will they get connected? I mean, if I dial 100, will this will go to the police? This is the technology which is...
Now, who is the user? There are 2 categories of users. One is every New Yorker is a user in terms of the potential market. But every New Yorker who is more prone to crime or health issues or fire is the real customer. Can 911 prevent fires? The answer is no. Can 911 prevent burglary? The answer is no. But it can create a sense of well-being in people if over a long period of time there is increased conviction and crime actually starts going down. So the net benefits of this project will accrue over a large period of time and not a short period of time. Again, a typical characteristic of infrastructure projects. नहीं है.
No, yes, going back to the first one, only those who have fire or those who are the daily users, but they are all potential users.
I said every New Yorker is a potential one. But that 911 has served would only be visible
Over time.
over a period of time. But somebody who gets weak now, suppose I call for ambulance and ambulance arrives, I'll say that it works for me. But for this word to spread and for the real gain or the real delivery of public good, it is still a lot of time away.
It builds up on fast and then.
Now that is typical of public good. That a public good would have multiple stakeholders for multiple objectives of success. Now they had a miserable communication campaign. What did the mayor do? This service was set up. Everybody collaborated, the service came up. So he went on live television to demonstrate that 911 works. Typical that if you have a new telephone call, 3G network was inaugurated. The same thing hasn't changed over the last 50 years. So Mayor Lindsay tells the word. Now you don't have to worry about remembering how to call ambulance or how to call this. Made a speech. And I will demonstrate to you that a squad car would arrive in 40 seconds of my making a call. So right on the live television he made a call. Please send a squad car and arrest all my councillors. And the car arrived in 40 seconds and it became the biggest joke. The mayor did get elected to the second term. That's evidence. 911 acquired its reputation of being the most important telephone number in the US only on 9/11.
Yes.
And please remember it is 911, 9/11.
Yeah.
I saw it, actually Osama did it. 9/11 was so
And the biggest problem with 911 is that if you have a telephone number in Delhi, your calling number is 9111. And in US, if you miss dialing this, dial this number, 911 picks up. And if you don't respond to them properly, the police squad car arrives in 2 minutes. So a lot of Indians have been victim of 911 in the US.
Which is true either way.
No, but Indians cannot understand the vision. You call 100 here. Yeah.
So whenever we have to design,
No. Before you go to the next part, you are calling this public-private partnership because a public good is involved, a private sector is involved.
And private sector is involved in delivery of public good.
Interest is involved.
Is involved in delivery of public good. And it is a partnership of
Objective is
delivery of public good
delivery of public good in the public interest,
in the public interest.
and others are involved.
And now if you look at all our infrastructure projects, they are public good. And we are trying to rope in another partner. How would that get structured or whatever is subsequent decision. But the fundamental logical decision is that now we are willing to look at this match.
And each stakeholder or each character or
The biggest
each role
challenge- the
something
biggest
again.
challenge that we have to first handle in any of these projects is we have to identify all these stakeholders which we fail to do
And also identify what they get.
and what they lose. Everyone has a price to pay.
Yeah, it's like providing a road creates benefit, but also kills the local guys who are making more money, the traders and all who.
Their jobs might be lost, their occupation might be lost. People can, and suppose you deliver a part of the infrastructure without the foot over bridges, people get killed on the road, and that can create so much of boomerang effect.
Oh, yes. और अभी तो बीच में वो लगा रहे हैं, डिवाइडर लगा रहे हैं,
So,
और प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट कर रहे हैं.
no, putting a divider or whatever activities that you are taking might build up or add to your cost of delivery or whatever. But in the process of designing this for one stakeholder, which was the driver on this road, we might have ended up actually overlooking another stakeholder whom we possibly never thought of.
Yeah, that's
So before we do a public good project, the most critical element is please identify everyone who is a stakeholder, because all these stakeholders put together make the constituency. So it needs a political will to deliver public good through public-private partnership, but the same willing person can turn upside down and kill the project. Because public good might be delivered to part of the public, and if rest of the public become more vocal,
Yeah.
his constituency might be affected and he might kill a wonderful project rather than correct it.
Sustainability itself becomes
like the local.
And sustainability, one would be in terms of financial and economics, the second would be absolutely political. And you might be threatened by your own creators.
Yeah, like the speed breakers on
So what will marketing do in this project?
Ah. It failed.
Sir, तो खत्म करा another 6 minutes. नहीं
हाँ, चाय तो ले लो.
चाहे बोल क्या?
no, but even the success of the project at times can kill the political constituency.
Okay. And which is why we have to see who is the initiator of that idea. Any public good project can be initiated by the government, can be initiated by the social sector, can be initiated by business. The three constituents, anyone can initiate the idea. But idea initiator versus idea supporter versus idea implementer are three visible constituencies. The non-visible constituencies, identifying them and engaging them and working out the marketing mix for each one of these constituencies is critical in these projects.
But that's where the kind of different social development level in the different countries, possibly, or even within a country, somewhere these projects are much more successful than.
Yeah, because the price paid by some of the constituency may be very different depending on the context of that country.
In fact, using this, you can identify why certain projects fail.
That's what.
Absolutely.
आज चाय आएगा 5 रुपये.
So marketing does have a small role to play. कोई नौकरी वोकरी दे दो.
नौकरी इस बार नहीं मिलेगा, अगले बार से.
So which means the alignment of the interests of the political versus the political and the public interest has been, as closer they are, the success becomes higher.
No, one is the success during the implementation of the project. That will be one part of the story. The second is the longevity of the project can be affected first. And I'll give you an example. Before the metro was announced to go down, Huda spent 5 crore rupees in setting up a very big fountain at Sikandarpur. Exactly the same way, Rajiv Chowk was refurbished and a fountain was set up at the cost of 22 crore rupees.
22.
And it was supposed to be a public good delivered that people can come and settle and enjoy the Fawara and have a nice time. And then the second project comes up. And the first thing to be demolished is the same thing. So longevity of a project. Today you might say this infrastructure we have set tall for 20 years or 25 years and that's how it's going to survive. By a single stroke of legislation, the government can do this project. Because it affects their constituency. And go for litigation.
Then whole thing gets further degraded.
The whole planning. So one are users and beneficiaries of whatever initiative you take, but rest of the people, because not everybody is going to use the same way as not every New Yorker is going to use it. But eventually the public good will be delivered over a period of time. If this project actually becomes successful, it is not about how much toll would be collected, how it was financed, but our real transaction cost of business should go down on this road. That should be the net impact. But that impact is still few years away. We must see a real reduction in consumption of fuels when people are flying on this road. That would be a national saving besides the individual saving. Because the individual saving you will always chop it off in terms of
Toll collection and all.
But the national interest should be served or the public interest should be served when the total thing actually goes down for the country.
Even more efficient, transaction cost reduces.
And that is not going to happen overnight.
Also like the Bharatpur project, everybody is happy with Delhi because the flyers.
They're using Delhi Metro.
Hmm?
The flyer from Bharatpur is being used in Delhi Metro.
Yeah, but Bharatpur जब बना था तब दिल्ली में था.
और कुछ कह रहे हैं
मार्केटिंग करना है.
ये ना कागज तो अलग अलग दिशा में चलता है ना डिपेंडिंग ऑन
more complicated was Leonardo da Vinci.
What is this? This is camera come this thing.
नहीं, but आपने ये नहीं बताया कि मार्केटिंग कैसे